phone auto-posted our private argument on social media. His revenge plan took 3 months. I never intended for that to happen. Never, never. But I guess it's what everyone says, isn't it? Let me begin this story by telling you guys I loved my husband very much. His name was Marcus. I still love him up until now, but love lately sounds like a word that has an address to be, for the shell of what we became into, but has now crumbled. It ended because I ruined it. I ruined everything, and he ruined me back. Hey Reddit guys, my name is Amanda, and I am 33 years old. But I will begin with how I met my husband. Marcus and I met 8 years ago in a way that seems too cinematic to be true. I was late for a client meeting downtown, burdened with a pile of unwieldy presentation boards and the defeated form of an umbrella turned inside out in the storm. Guess who was my good Samaritan there? Marcus, popping up like an angel out of my dreams, gently leading me to the building I was headed to, umbrella aloft. We just naturally started a conversation. He was pretty laid back. And before long, he was laying his business card on my palm. As I showed him my way of hacking my way up as a marketing executive, he told me he is an architect. It turned out that through our first meeting, we shared the love for creativity and how to solve problems. And to be honest, those were the things that attracted us in the first place. In 1 year, we had become inseparable, so our relationship continued for more than 2 years. Then Marcus proposed. His proposal was so romantic. He had booked a suite in a hotel and decorated it with roses and candles. Everywhere was so beautiful and romantic. I can remember all of that night. But more than anything else, I will never forget the feeling. I was the happiest girl alive. He made me feel special and like a princess. And of course, I said yes. Our wedding was a dream come true, too. It took place in a botanic garden among our families and our closest friends. It included some laughs describing how Marcus was the calm and the steady I needed, while I added spontaneity and vibrance to his otherwise well-structured life. It was as if we made one another feel whole. We honestly felt we were destined to be together. He worked his way up the corporate ladder and was a partner at his firm by 34. I was doing well, too. By our 4th wedding anniversary, I had become the head of marketing at a boutique agency, serving high-profile clients with tight deadlines. We were a power couple, or so it seemed. Cracks began to show as our careers consumed more of our time. Marcus had always been so methodical, scheduling every minute of his and my life, even down to our wedding day. But I craved spontaneity and adventure, and as we got older, the flame just felt to be fading. But for me, that spark was the most vital part. I never wanted the two of us to become one of those couples who went through the motions. The monotony was killing me. Marcus was living his best life that way. Whenever I tried to talk with him about how I felt wronged in our relationship, I would hear, "We have a good life. What do you need more? I am doing everything for you, and you will always find a way to be mad at me." And then he would get out of the room, or he would continue working on his laptop and say those words without even looking me in the eyes. That hurt me. I wanted to live and not just work, and Marcus only wanted to work. Sometimes I felt like he loved his job and nothing else. Those cracks were the earliest symptoms that led me down the path of infidelity. So yeah, it's not a single moment that changed everything. It was a slow decline. Marcus became increasingly distant, his mind in the air with blueprints and meetings. I felt like I was becoming part of the wallpaper, just an ornament in his well-curated life. When I tried to explain again how I felt, he dismissed it, saying, "I'm doing this for us. You'll see it'll be worth it." I tried to be mum, and he didn't hear me whatsoever. And it did feel like I was not being listened to anymore. It was as though I was no longer loved or wanted. We had lost the passion we had at the beginning of our relationship as well. He would drop everything as long as he could fuck me, but now he wouldn't even dare to look me in the eyes. And then I started to resent him, even though I was covering it up with normal behavior. It was easier than confronting the truth. And then Jacob came into the picture, a consultant we had recruited to help with a big campaign. Marcus was systematic and restrained. Jacob was vibrant and spontaneous. He saw me the way Marcus hadn't in years, and I was too starved for attention to send him away. I flirted with him a bit, allowing myself to have fun, figuring I had earned it. Our innocent flirt had quickly morphed into something very passionate, thrilling, and intense. Of course, I knew I was wrong. I understood it, but like I said, it was thrilling. I could not let go. After many years, I finally began to feel seen, like I mattered, like I was loved and wanted by a man. Perhaps that was a coping mechanism for the stagnation my husband and I were in. Yes, I knew it was wrong, but I felt needed in life. I wrote it to make it live for me again. Jacob was my resuscitator. He restored the spark, and my life became interesting again. But what I thought was resurrecting me was actually killing me. It was destroying me. Here's everything you need to know about my affair. I met Jacob at work when my agency hired him as a freelance consultant for a high-stakes campaign for a luxury brand. As soon as he stepped in, he caught my eye. He was radiant, charming, and very confident. Well, he was just the kind of person who captures attention, so he caught mine. He was also so handsome, tall with black hair, green eyes, naturally charismatic, and also most important of things, he had always, at the exact moment, the right words. He made everyone feel at ease around him. As I've mentioned before, I met Jacob at work when my agency hired him as a freelance consultant on a high-stakes campaign for a luxury brand. He walked into the office and immediately exuded the type of charm and self-assurance that draws the eye. He always knew what to say to put everyone at ease. That was my favorite thing about him. He made me feel comfortable and good. He made me feel wanted and loved. With him, I felt seen. At first, our communications were strictly business. He had brains, was so full of creative ideas, and just seemed to fit right into our team. I admired his way of commanding a room at a meeting, how his thinking ran in a different direction from the corporate one I knew. But this wasn't just admiration. I felt an undeniable attraction to him that I couldn't ignore. At first, our conversations had been strictly professional and nothing more. But at that point, I really liked him. He had a sharp mind, was full of creative ideas, and seemed to fit seamlessly into our team. I respected him, the way he commanded the room in meetings, his thought process so unlike the rigid corporate environment I was accustomed to. But not only admiration, I felt myself being drawn to him in a way I couldn't shake. It started small. He stayed late after meetings to talk, dropping subtle compliments. "You're the most brilliant person in this room, Amanda," he said one time after a particularly contentious brainstorm. I laughed it off, but his comment haunted me. It felt good to be noticed. One evening, following a late-night strategy session, Jacob suggested going for a drink to relax and catch up. It was casual, harmless, or at least that's what I told myself. Marcus and I used to do this type of thing together, but lately, he'd been too busy or too tired. Over cocktails at a dimly lit bar, Jacob and I discussed everything and anything. Work, life, dreams. He listened, asked questions, and got me laughing about the stresses of my job. I hadn't felt so seen or so heard in years. At the end of the evening, he walked me to my car. There was a taut silence between us for a moment. I knew it, an unarticulated accord, but we didn't do anything about it that night, and yet I felt something had changed. Jacob and I had become closer over the weeks. We began texting outside of work, initially about the campaign, but then about personal stuff. He would send me funny memes or ask how my day was going, and I would catch myself smiling at my phone like a teenager. The breakthrough happened on another late night at the office. Everybody else had gone, and Jacob was helping me nail down a presentation. We were standing closer than I normally like to, looking at slides on my laptop, and his hand brushed against mine. It was such an electric moment, and before I could even think, he leaned in and kissed me. I didn't stop him. I should have, but I didn't. From there on out, we were intertwined. It was like I was living a double life. By day, I was the competent, polished executive, the dutiful wife. At night, or in stolen moments, I was with Jacob, excavating a side of myself I believed I'd buried. We were cautious, or so I believed. No late-night phone calls, no obvious signs. We'd rendezvous in out-of-the-way locales, his apartment, boutique hotels, maybe a conference room if the office was clear. It felt exhilarating, wrong, illicit, and addictively dangerous. Jacob made me feel alive in a way Marcus hadn't in years. He was impromptu, impassioned, and unrestrained. But under the hoopla, I felt a gnawing guilt I couldn't shake. I adored Marcus, or at least I thought I did, but with Jacob I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Desired. But Jacob wasn't only charming, he was married too. This was one of the first things I learned about him. He wore his wedding ring openly and referred casually to his wife Claire in meetings. It should have been enough to distance me. Rather, it comforted me. Someone I could steal moments with without jeopardizing the issue of how long us would last. His willingness to talk about his marriage put me on guard. I didn't sense that I was venturing into dangerous territory until I was there. The chemistry between us was immediate, and our relationship moved fast. Early on, we set some boundaries, rules of sorts, that in our minds made it much easier to rationalize what we were doing. There was no talk about leaving our spouses, no promises of a future. We were two bodies stopping the gaps in our lives. That's it. We became experts at hiding. Their lunch breaks became stolen moments in his car. Business trips turned into opportunities to book adjoining hotel rooms. We steered clear of places where anyone could possibly recognize us, hitting out-of-the-way bars or quiet restaurants. Jacob was as cautious as I was. He loved Claire, or so he said, but she couldn't give him what I could. "This doesn't change how I feel about her," he told me once, his tone flat. "It just helps life feel more doable." I said the same thing to myself about Marcus. It wasn't that I didn't love him. I did. But with Jacob, I felt vibrant in a way I hadn't in years. The affair was exhilarating. He had a gift for making moments into adventures. He'd arrange elaborate rendezvous, like slipping away to a nearby city for an afternoon, or picking me up at a park to drink coffee on a bench. It seemed romantic, illicit, and dangerous, but the discomfort remained, always hiding just below the surface. There were nights I would come home to Marcus and literally be unable to look him in the eye. He'd ask me about my day, and I'd respond vaguely, scared he would see right through me. In the meantime, Jacob and I kept up the charade at work. We were professionals, colleagues who rarely spoke outside of meetings. Nobody had any idea, or so we assumed. I lived for months between two worlds, the loving wife and the guilty mistress. I knew it wasn't going to last, but I never expected how it would all unravel. I thought I was careful. Every text to Jacob was wiped the instant it went out. Our meetings were orchestrated, and our phone conversations were brief and focused. Marcus was busy enough with work that I was safe. Sure, he'd never suspect a thing. But I underestimated him. It began slowly, with Marcus becoming more introspective around me. Initially, I blamed work stress. He'd been working long hours on a big project, coming home drained and emotionally absent. But then I started noticing the questions. "You've been working late a lot lately," he said one evening casually, as if it were an afterthought. "Anything major at work that I should know about?" I felt a twinge of discomfort, but I dismissed it. Just the usual craziness. You know how it is. He didn't press, but his eyes stayed on me a moment too long. What I didn't realize was that Marcus had been putting things together for weeks. The late nights, the phone with a lock I even forgot the code to, the way I talked about him like sunshine poured from my mouth. He did not call me out right away. Instead, he waited. He watched. One night, while I was in the shower, he checked my phone. My messages to Jacob had disappeared, but Marcus was wise. He knew how to see deleted messages, how to recover past data. He discovered a single damning text I had missed. "I look so forward to seeing you tomorrow. Same place?" That night he said nothing. Instead, he opted to test me. The next night he returned home early, much earlier than I thought he would. I had just come back from meeting Jacob. My hair was a bit tousled, my perfume light but still discernible. When Marcus leaned in to kiss me, something he hadn't done in weeks, I froze. "Long day?" he asked, though his tone was light and his eyes were sharp. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Exhausting." But Marcus wasn't fooled. He withdrew, his face unreadable. "I was thinking we could, have dinner tomorrow," he said. "Just the two of us. It's been a while." I hesitated, my mind racing. Jacob and I had plans, only I couldn't say that. "Of course," I said quickly. The following day, Marcus didn't come to the dinner he planned for the two of us. I waited for almost an hour at the restaurant and called and texted him, but he did not respond. When I came home, the house was dark. Initially, I thought he wasn't in the apartment, but I saw him then sitting in the living room with his laptop open on the coffee table. "Marcus?" I said cautiously. He raised his gaze to me, his face inscrutable. "Have a seat," he said, his tone steady but chill. I paused, but the heaviness of his tone left me no other option. As I settled into the chair opposite him, he turned the laptop around for me to see. On that screen was a live feed from a hidden camera, one I had not known about. The video showed Jacob and me in his car parked in a dark lot. We were laughing and kissing, oblivious to the world around us. And then I saw the date, time-stamped from earlier that afternoon, and my stomach dropped. "How long?" Marcus asked, his voice steady but edged like a knife. I couldn't speak. My throat went dry. My mind scrambled for an explanation. A lie. Anything. "How long?" His voice increased in volume, the placid facade breaking. "Marcus, Don't." He closed the laptop with a bang and jumped up. "Do you know how long I've been watching for? How long I've waited for you to be honest with me?" He unleashed weeks, maybe months, of suspicion, anger, and betrayal, and the room spun. He enumerated every clue I'd dropped, every slip I believed I'd pasted over. And then came the final blow. "You didn't even see the tracker in your car, did you?" he said, his voice laced with contempt. "I have known for weeks, Amanda. I just wanted to see how far you will go." The fight that ensued was volcanic. I yelled, I sobbed, I pleaded for forgiveness, but Marcus was not interested in my enabling excuses. At some point in the fight, I picked up my phone to show him what, I don't even know. Somehow, in the chaos, the brawl was filmed and put up on my social media. A mistake I didn't even realize I'd made until the moment passed and I got the notification. By the time I understood what happened, Marcus was gone. By morning, everyone who knew us, friends, family, and coworkers, had heard our private, devastating fight. The responses flooded in, some sympathetic, some gleeful, many cruel. After that night, Marcus never spoke to me again. Not about the fight, not about the post, not about anything. For weeks, I presumed he was just gone. He didn't file for divorce, didn't block me on social media, didn't do anything really. It was as if he had vanished from my life. In the meantime, I had to live with the consequences of my own actions. They talked in hushed tones when I walked into rooms. My boss discovered Jacob and let him go, which made things even worse between us. 3 months after Marcus had left, his revenge came. It began with a delivery to my door, a box full of photographs. Not just photos of me and Jacob, but of my private life. Intimate moments captured by hidden cameras I didn't even know were there. The photographs were accompanied by a note. "Your truth deserves to be seen." I was horrified. I tried calling Marcus, but his number was no longer in service. The following day, the photos started coming out on the internet. They weren't so explicit that they could break any laws, but they were explicit enough to humiliate me. Marcus had staggered them, leaking each slowly, one at a time, so that the scandal endured. It didn't stop there. My private messages, emails, and even old diary entries started surfacing on anonymous forums. Each piece of news about me presented me in the most negative light. He even hired a person to stalk me and took pictures of me in my worst moments and put them with the leaked messages. At the end of the first month, I was let go. By month 2, my parents had stopped answering my calls, embarrassed by the spectacle I'd become. Even Jacob left me, saying I was too much trouble. And Marcus dealt the killing blow. He hit me with an email, our first communication since he left. "Amanda, you robbed me of my dignity and my peace. I simply returned the favor. I'm done, so you should be too. Think of this as the last piece of our marriage you'll ever get. Marcus." Also attached was a link to a video he had edited, a montage of our life together, juxtaposed with clips from the hidden cameras from our house and the parking spot. I don't remember telling you, but when my husband was not home, sometimes I used to invite Jacob home, and we had sex in every place there, bedroom, kitchen, and table, revealing my betrayal in grueling detail. It was a work of cruelty, an intelligently engineered instrument that would make sure I would never forget what I had done. It is as you think. He posted that video online. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of missed calls and texts from friends, co-workers, and even my parents. My heart sank as I opened my phone and saw what it was that they were reacting to. Marcus had shared a video on social media, a montage of our life together. At first it was cute, wedding pictures, vacations, quiet moments at home, but then the tone shifted. The video concluded with bits of our argument that had been inadvertently made public, sandwiched between texts and photos he'd taken from my phone, messages between Jacob and me, selfies we'd sent each other, even screenshots of hotel bookings. It was all out, all on the table, for everyone to see. It was accompanied by the caption, "Sometimes the person who you trust the most is the one that breaks you." I was humiliated. Friends and colleagues contacted me, some expressing sympathy, others denouncing me. My boss summoned me to her office that afternoon and said the scandal was bad for the company's reputation. I was placed on indefinite leave, and my career, for all practical purposes, was over. By 3 months in, I was a wreck. My friends had backed away, my reputation was shot, and my finances were plummeting after I lost my job. Marcus, on the other hand, was thriving. He began to go out a lot more, date more, and he was posting pictures of himself with a beautiful colleague, a woman I'd always been uncomfortable about. He did not deny that they were dating, but the implication was obvious. One night, I walked into the house to find Marcus sitting at the dining table with a pile of papers in front of him. "Time for this," he said, sliding the papers over to me. They were divorce papers, carefully written. He'd outlined it all, the division of our assets, the sale of our house, even spousal support. He'd ensured I'd end up with almost nothing. "Sign them," he said in a calm and cold voice, "and don't even think about contesting this. I have everything I need to make sure you do not win." I glared at him, tears rolling down my face. "Why are you doing this to me?" His smile creased up the corner of his lips, and he leaned back casually in his chair. "Because you didn't just betray me, Amanda. You ruined the life we had built together. This is just to make you feel what I felt." It was shortly after I signed the papers that Marcus left. He sold the house and went to another city, taking the last remnants of our life together. Jacob and his wife Claire soon left the company, probably to end the gossip. Now I was left to pick up the pieces of my broken life, tormented by the knowledge that Marcus had orchestrated every bit of it. His revenge wasn't impulsive. It was cold, methodical, and devastating. And as much as I wanted to hate him for it, a piece of me knew I deserved it. His revenge was 3 months in the making, but will play on repeat in my mind for the rest of my life. When Marcus sold the house, I was forced to leave. I'd battled to retain it, but he'd ensured I had no legal footing. My career was in tatters, and I had no savings to speak of. I couldn't afford an apartment anywhere in the city. I ended up renting a small, dilapidated one-bedroom on the outskirts of town. The building reeked of mildew, and the walls were so thin I could hear my neighbors fighting every night. It was a far cry from the large, beautifully decorated apartment that Marcus and I had shared. I sold off most of my stuff to get through. The designer furniture, the jewelry Marcus bought me, even my wedding dress. I let it all go. I could only see each sale as chipping away another piece of my old life, like I was devouring myself, until I was left with no flesh, but shame and regret. The scandal destroyed my reputation and humiliated me, but also affected my relationship with my parents. The first time the scandal broke, my parents were blindsided. They'd always loved Marcus, as if he were the son they never had. My mom called me crying, pleading with me to explain. "How could you do this, Amanda?" she sobbed. "Marcus loved you. We trusted you." My father was less sentimental, but no less let down. "You embarrass this family," he said in a phone call. "Do you have any idea how many people I've had call me about that video? Your aunts, my colleagues, all I tell them." I tried to describe, to tell them how lonely I was, how my marriage was cracking, but they didn't want to know. There was no justification for what I'd done to them. They wouldn't talk to me for weeks. It felt as if I'd lost not only my husband and my home, but my family too. In the end, my mother softened, if a bit. One evening she called me, her tone tentative. "You're not no one to me, Amanda," she told me, "but I don't know how to help." She and my father invited me to stay with them, But their house was hours away, in a little town where everyone knew each other. I just couldn't face the possibility of going home and dealing with whispers and judgment. Instead, they sent me a little money to help with rent and groceries. It didn't amount to much, but it was enough to keep me above water for a spell. The months after were the most difficult of my life. I looked for jobs, but my reputation preceded me. My name was associated with the scandal, and employers were reluctant to risk hiring me. My parents kept their distance, reaching out every so often. My mother would occasionally say how much she missed Marcus, as if to remind me of what I'd discarded. Each day there in that little apartment, I was reminded of how far I'd fallen. The walls were barren, the refrigerator nearly empty, and the silence was deafening. My future, once full of promise and always just right at my fingertips, felt like a distant memory, and there I was, stuck in a life I hardly recognized. My life kept going with a very hard sense of regret. I destroyed everything. The months after were the most difficult of my life. I looked for jobs, but my reputation preceded me. My name was associated with the scandal, and employers were reluctant to risk hiring me. Each day there in that little apartment, I was reminded of how far I'd fallen. The walls were barren, the refrigerator nearly empty, and the silence was deafening. My future, once full of promise and always just right at my fingertips, felt like a distant memory. And there I was, stuck in a life I hardly recognized. Initially, I thought I would bounce back by throwing myself into getting another job. My resume was impressive, years of experience, such wonderful references, at least until the scandal, a history of success. But no matter how many applications I submitted, I received no interest. The whispers trailed me everywhere I went. In the corporate world, reputations travel quickly, and mine was irreparably damaged. I could get close to getting a position, but something would happen. An employer would go radio silent after a promising interview, or I'd hear whispers about the video. One night, following yet another rejection, I sobbed in my car. It was parked outside a grocery store. I had blown my last money on instant noodles and canned soup there. Hopelessness washed over me like a tsunami, and my sobs blurred the view of the steering wheel. My savings quickly dried up, and I had no job and no income. The little bits my parents had sent me vanished within a few weeks. I began to sell all my remaining possessions, my designer handbag, the watch Marcus had gifted me on our anniversary, even my laptop. The landlord, at first understanding, became impatient. "You're 2 months behind on rent," he said in a tense conversation. "If you don't pay up by the end of the month, you'll have to go." I rushed to find anything, freelance work, odd jobs, even something like cleaning, but nothing took. I was either too overqualified or too marred by the scandal to be trusted. Finally, I exhausted the options. One night, I had nowhere to turn, so I packed a small suitcase and walked out of the apartment. For the next few nights, I slept in my car, hoping no one would see me in the darkened parking lots where I parked. The last straw was when I contacted an old friend, someone I've known since college. I thought she'd be able to help me, but when I called, she hesitated before talking. "I don't think it's a good idea for us to talk at the moment," she said awkwardly. "Sophia, I'm sorry, Amanda, but I have to think of my own life." I hung up the phone, staring unbelievingly at it. I'd officially scorched every bridge, alienated every friend. One night, as I lay in the back seat of my car, I watched the stars through the windshield. I reflected on everything that I had lost: my career, my marriage, my dignity. For the first time, I questioned whether or not I would be able to recover, or whether this was the life I was doomed to live. This was my story, guys. I had everything, and I ruined it just for a little more pleasure and adrenaline. I forgot that life is not just about pleasure and excitement. I forgot about the values I was grown up with, and here I am left with nothing, and ready to be judged. Thank you for reading my story. Amanda. Update. Hello, Reddit guys. I am Amanda again with an update regarding my miserable life. A few months later, my life is still miserable, and also I have changed my small apartment because I needed something cheaper. I managed to find a small studio apartment that would cost more, but it's far away from the center, so life is still the same. The days have passed in a monotonous wasteland. I have been living paycheck to paycheck, portioning out food, and worrying all the time about how I was going to pay my bills. I didn't even like walking past mirrors. I don't recognize myself anymore. My formerly shiny demeanor is wearing off. My hair is unkempt, my clothes mismatched and tattered. Sometimes I'd come across people from my previous life, ex-friends, colleagues, and even casual acquaintances, who'd look away or pretend not to see me. Every time this happened, shame burned in my chest. And yes, I have seen Marcus after the divorce. The first time I saw Marcus after the divorce, I sat alone at a small cafe, sweetening a cup of coffee I could scarcely afford. He strode in, every bit the well-tailored suit. He was confident, his aura flashing in contrast to the defeated me. He didn't notice me at first, and for a moment I contemplated sneaking out without him seeing. But then his gaze held me, and I was trapped. "Amanda," he said, his voice neutral but chill. "Marcus." My throat felt dry. He didn't take a seat, but he didn't walk off. "How are you?" he asked, although he made it clear in his tone that he didn't want an answer. "I'm surviving," I told him, mustering a weak smile. He gave a nod, eyeing me for a moment. "I see." His eyes darted to the cheap chipped mug in front of me, then back to my face. "Well, I hope it works out for you." It was not said maliciously, but it stung nonetheless. He was gone before I got another word out, his presence like a storm cloud that rolled in and out, leaving me rattled. Yeah, I have actually seen him on a few more occasions, but every time I have tried to talk to him, it has been the same. He is cold, and it seems like he doesn't want to talk to me, of course. He is right, I can't judge him, and while I am living with such a great sense of regret. Well, after months of searching, I have finally managed to get a job. I found the cashier job at a shabby convenience store after weeks of frantically searching. It isn't fancy, but it is a lifeline, a steady paycheck that enabled me to pay for my tiny studio apartment. It is repetitive work, but it takes a toll. 8-hour shifts on my feet at a cashier's register, more often than not with impatient customers, broken equipment, and a boss who seems to take pleasure in highlighting my mistakes. Most days, I feel invisible. Customers barely make eye contact as they pass their money to me or swipe their cards, treating me as an extension of the register. I put my head down and work hard, but the humiliation of it all never really affects me. I had gone from overseeing high-stakes projects and sharing air with executives to refilling shelves and mopping up slushed drinks. Every beep of the scanner is a reminder of how low I'd fallen. Since it is on a rough side of town, I encounter a lot of tough situations. Drunk patrons arrive late at night, slurring their speech and occasionally berating me. Teenagers attempt to steal candy, and my manager always makes me stop them, a task which I despise. One night, a man came in and attempted to pay with counterfeit money. When I mentioned it, he got aggressive, yelling at me and calling me names. I choked back tears while my manager intervened to resolve the situation, but I was shaken up for days afterward. My fellow colleagues aren't so great either. Most are teens in part-time jobs, or people who, like me, have no options. There isn't much camaraderie, and the break room is an uninviting area with a broken vending machine and a stained couch. Wherever I go, whatever I do, the ghost of my old life follows me. At night, I lie on the bed and stare at the cracks in the ceiling, playing back together all the wrong choices and decisions that have built my confinement. Sometimes, I look for whom I am to blame. Maybe it is Marcus or Jacob, or all of those who have judged me so harshly. In the end, even my guilty party labels stained with my name. And there's the social media, the torture that I don't seem to be able to quit. Everywhere I scroll, I see the posts of my former friends and colleagues who professionally thrive, who got their promotions, their vacations. Each one of them, armed with a broad smile, slaps me in the face, a reminder of what I have lost and will never take back. Never do what I did. Please don't judge me anymore. Stay safe, Amanda.